You run into Atlanta when you need a few dollars. No, you're not a colleague, you're a fucking colonizer.
Bill Clinton had Don't Stop. Hillary Clinton had Fight Song. Kamala has Freedom. And last night, it was Get Low.
I'm in these streets, let me tell you, I'm everywhere.
Donald Trump, on the other hand, has been talking a big game about securing our border, but he does not walk the walk. He does not walk it like he talks it.
We're going to build a wall. It's going to be built. It's not even, believe it or not, it's not even a difficult thing to do.
And now they have pledged to carry out the largest deportation, a mass deportation, in American history.
These illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English.
As they say, they're not like us.
You know who to vote for. You know Lil Ju. Hey.
Wrong to somehow suggest that an undocumented immigrant is a criminal. Being an undocumented immigrant is not a crime. I know what a crime looks like. An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal. 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 An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal.
She said she supported taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for detained migrants. She also said she supported
taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for detained migrants. She actually said she supported that.
She both wrote and answered in the affirmative when she was asked this. Oh. And she said she also supported it for federal prisoners.
So it wasn't only about that case. I made sure that they changed the policy in the state of California so that every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access to the medical care that they desired and need.
California has agreed to provide this 56-year-old with sex reassignment surgery as soon as possible and then move her to a female inmate facility.
Wide range of progressive reforms, like restoring voting rights for felons and allowing undocumented immigrants to get driver's licenses. The latest reform safeguards the rights of trans people.
Because as governor, he also signed into law a measure that allowed schools to place tampons and other period products, menstrual care products, and hygiene products in boys' and girls' bathrooms for those particularly in grades 4 to 12.
Republican lawmakers in Minnesota pushed back against the legislation and attempted to amend the bill to apply only to girls' bathrooms, but the amendment failed. So we can verify that Tim Walz signed a law requiring Minnesota public schools to provide free tampons in public school bathrooms
and gender-affirming surgeries and treatments for young children. As governor of Minnesota, Walz declared young boys and girls can go to get gender-affirming treatments and hormonal treatments.
Because there's an interesting fact, in case you didn't know, hard hats are actually unisex. Everybody's laughing.
Kamala Harris is going to change the world. And
Mr. Amazing. These people are trying to get them to vote, and that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
Let's just do the work of giving first-time home buyers a $25,000 down payment assistance. Let them get their foot in the door.
We are sending them to the United States Capitol where the Biden administration will be able to address the needs of the people that they are allowing to cross our border.
Destroy New York City. We're getting 10,000 migrants a month.
Do you have plans to visit the border?
Not today.
The national government has turned its back on New York City. It reaches a point where it becomes unmanageable.
The shelter system stretched past its capacity this summer. At one point, more migrants in city shelters than homeless Americans.
They're reminded that no matter their immigration status, they will receive medical attention at no cost.
From this moment on, it's downhill.
Kamala Harris's campaign event in Atlanta getting the crowd hyped.
Yeah, girl, I'm out here in these streets.
This is the new reality for agents in the Swanton sector. 295 miles of tough and varying border terrain across 5 northeastern counties of New York.
Officials say some Mexican migrants believe there's a better chance they'll get into the U.S. and they can fly to Canada without a visa.
Just by the sheer volume of migrants, this is a highly sophisticated operation that we're talking about.
This issue will destroy New York City.
So as it turns out, the U.S. has a border crisis at both of its borders at the exact same time.
We're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals. That's correct.
People who are convicted in prison, like the Boston Marathon bomber, on death row, they should be able to vote?
I think we should have that conversation.
Surveillance video shows a suspect on a scooter fleeing a 62-year-old woman to the ground in Brooklyn last month while stealing her purse.
One of 62 incidents. So far, police have arrested 7 people.
A hacker would break into the phones and use the owner's banking apps to make fraudulent purchases in the U.S. and South America. When the accounts drained, police say Parra shipped the phones to Colombia to be reprogrammed.
In recent months, a wave of migrant crime has washed over our city.
They repeatedly kicked and punched a police officer and lieutenant in Times Square nearly a week ago. The NYPD says of the dozen migrants involved in the attack, 6 were arrested. 1 of them are in jail. The remaining, we're told, were released. The incident sending shockwaves.
Brazen cell phone robberies in New York City that's been attributed to a Venezuelan gang called Tren de Aragua, which has its origins at a prison outside of Caracas. A number of the gang members escaped in September 2023.
Mata allegedly fired at both officers, shooting Officer Christopher Abreu in the leg and Officer Richard Yaruso point blank in the front of his bulletproof vest. In court this morning, the ADA says Mata also said that shooting at police officers is what they do in his home country.
A lot of these suspected migrants involved have little paper trail. Basically no criminal records in the U.S., no social media, and in some cases he says it's hard for police to even authenticate a suspect's name or date of birth. We're live in Chinatown.
Stop, 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 stop. Kira, Kira.
I'm in these streets, let me tell you, I'm everywhere.
They just added 4 senior advisors specifically for the Latino voting outreach.
Hotties for Harris. America, the world is watching Staten Island. I'm Old Testament, baby. I'm gonna make sure that all these politicians pay for hanging us out to dry. You know who to vote for. You know Lil Ju. Hey.
Walk it like I talk it. Walk it like I talk it. Talk it. Walk it like I talk it. Let's go.
To understand Chicago's migrant crisis, let's first start by covering what has been going on in the country responsible for most of the migrants, Venezuela. For years, Venezuela has been suffering from hyperinflation. It began in the 1980s with double-digit inflation, and in 2019, the Central Bank of Venezuela estimates that inflation reached over 53 million %.
And the currency becoming effectively worthless, and is ranked in the bottom 5 of the Western Hemisphere and the lowest in the whole South American continent. The oil industry in Venezuela dates back more than a century ago to 1922, when Royal Dutch Shell first hit oil in the country, and largest concentrations of crude oil that could be found anywhere in the world was right here across Venezuela, in an area known as the Orinoco Oil Belt, while the country's production had exploded to become the 2nd highest producer in the entire world. By 1935, within only 13 years of when oil was first discovered in the country, oil was already making up more than 90% of all of Venezuela's exports. The government begins relying less and less on the taxes from their own citizens, and so the government begins becoming less accountable to its own people. And then in the 1970s came the global oil price boom that followed the OPEC oil embargo of Tens of billions of dollars in oil profits started flooding into the Venezuelan government's coffers. Venezuelan government officials embezzled as much as $100 billion worth of the state's oil revenue, level of corruption. Refineries on the U.S. Gulf Coast that they owned after 1986, and with continued government spending on social welfare at the time. And $20 billion of that amount was owed to foreign banks. So, in 1989, Venezuela appealed to the International Monetary Fund for a financial bailout, and as a part of those negotiations, they agreed to a series of austerity measures that cut back on social welfare spending. 1972 and 1997, as the oil wealth poured into the country, were worth an estimated $500 billion. And by 1997, Venezuelan exports of crude oil to the U.S. market peaked, and America was importing about 17.4% of their oil from Venezuela. Oil production was once around 3.2 million barrels a day back in the mid-1990s.
Is rampant government corruption and extreme amounts of money printing.
Under the stresses of fleeing most experienced workers at the same time, resulted in a sharp decline of Venezuela's productivity when it came to oil production. Chavez's administration in Venezuela led the country to purchasing $20 billion worth of arms from Russia, included Russian fighter jets and dozens of tanks, granting the Russian state-owned oil company on extraction partners in the Venezuelan oil fields, and by taking out loans from Russia, loans that they put up 49.9% of their ownership stake in Citgo in the United States as collateral for, paying that rate. And in fact, they've seen a continuous decline in oil production over the past 30 years ever since, to the point where today, the economic collapse of Venezuela since 2014 is of such an extreme nature that it's widely regarded as one of the worst economic collapses anywhere in the world in the past century.
This has resulted in massive shortages of food, medicine, and access to electricity. So, in order to survive, millions of Venezuelans have resorted to fleeing to other countries for a chance at a better life. Places like Colombia, Panama, Peru, and the United States. To get to the United States, migrants have to brave the Darien Gap, where they not only have to contend with snake bites and drowning, but also armed paramilitary groups that prey on migrants. Then they have to pass through the Panamanian jungle on foot and have to survive going through Mexico, where they may be robbed and beaten by both Mexican police and cartel affiliates. And finally, they make it to the U.S. And in places like Texas, government officials have decided to bus migrants to sanctuary cities like New York and Chicago to deal with the issue.
We're talking about City Council today and a vote to spend $51 million on helping migrants here in Chicago. CBS 2 was there for all the action, and Dana, strong feelings all around.
How can you come into a community and dump people in our community? This is not fair.
It's going to destroy our business. It's going to destroy our hopes and dreams.
Here's when they had to bring the kids and said, we're not paying them nearly enough.
Also have the courage to reject that term illegal alien.
The third largest economy in the United States, Chicago, the Democratic National Convention.
We're going to show you how we feel about the Democratic National Convention.
Turn it up. Thank you.
If you think you're going to have a peaceful Democratic National Convention in the city of Chicago while our people are starving,
that's right.
Stay tuned.
Police are now having to show up in enormous numbers. There was a counter-protest, a group of activists, and they had to be protected, Army, because the so-called Love and Tolerance Brigade. You've seen a lot of this with your own eyes. What is the mood like in the streets there?
Now, to align yourself with somebody who's obviously a one-term mayor, if he even makes it that far, you better be worrying about your job. You better be worrying about your longevity, because we're going to vote and we're going to get you out because you ain't doing right by us. That's what time it is.
As black people who have been hurt continuously by the city and country it loves, it ain't our responsibility to take care of everybody else.
And anger.
But we are not going to be ignored, Brandon. Mayor Johnson.
Many in Chicago's black community and the city council speaking out against spending $51 million to house migrants.
The work we have done together has been to create the National Museum of the American Latino. And
Them to just sit up here with this crap and we're supposed to listen to it.
I'm the deputy mayor for immigrant, migrant, and refugee rights.
These decisions need to be brought to the community.
We need that money in my neighborhood. We need that on my block. So I'm asking y'all to use our tax money for our people. We need it.
You vote for the money for these immigrants today, and we coming for them seats. You can believe that.
The police are fighting with them in the shelters that you guys are funding. You guys think it's a great idea, but yet your police officers are getting attacked. Your public's getting attacked.
More than 17,000 migrants are currently calling Chicago home and are being housed in places like the O'Hare Airport, police stations, universities, and other temporary shelters.
Critics accuse the city of prioritizing migrants over citizens. Qatar Truss is a longtime Chicago resident and joins me now. Qatar, why are you going to vote Republican for the first time ever?
It's simple. The Democratic Party has failed us here in Chicago, our local government as well as our state government, and even our president has made our migrants a priority over American citizens. And so we have to stand up and we have to let them know that it is unacceptable.
This message for black voters.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
Now somebody scream!
Oprah Winfrey.
Party for Harris.
And the leaders that were elected to represent you take that and give it to people who aren't from your community, that came across the southern border. Is there a level of betrayal in that?
Of course, there's a level of betrayal, because if Mayor Brandon Johnson had just picked up the phone and called the community that he comes from to ask us if that's something that he should be considering, we would have told him.
None of that. None of that. This is about our people demanding the resources, just as you're giving these people, these newcomers who are walking into this country.
You were right.
And sister's correct. How do you take a new group of people that have paid no taxes, can't vote, and you put them in front of the voters?
I'm not going to pay them no damn taxes.
And said we're not paying them nearly enough.
Whole thing about the border. We've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border is secure?
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration. Yeah, girl, I'm out here in these streets.
To the lovely people of Wakanda, I know you will make the right choice. And as always, Wakanda forever.
You're a fucking colonizer.
Paid for by Kamala Harris.
Because I represent the whole of the United States of America.
One of the alarming predictions you make in the book is you mention that blacks will be pretty much a permanent underclass in America by the year 2015. Why the year 2015? 2015 because what I've concluded from analysis is that there's going to be a converging of social factors nationally and internationally that's going to place blacks in a permanent status of underclassship. And one, that the next generation of whites can be more anti-black than they've been since the Civil Rights Movement. 2, we anticipate by the same token about 86 million Hispanics coming into the United States and about 41 million Asians by that point in time, which is going to kick black folk out of being the minority in the society down to a minority. We've been number 2 in the society for 400 years as a group. We're going to become number 4 because at that point in time, all the new groups coming into America, they're coming in higher than we are because this country operates off of a preferential acceptance program, which means that groups are coming in based on skin color, going from the lightest down to the darkest. Light, yellow, brown, black. And that's what our immigration laws are based on.
Cause a lot of us to be woke.
No, you're not a colleague, you're a fucking colonizer.
And I love it. But folks are woke and I love it. I love it.
They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy.
Mr.
Media Giants.